Greetings of the day, folks, and welcome to How the World Works from The Economist Next Door, where I, Amar Dixit, will be your host for the day. In a world running amok with buzzwords surrounding sustainability, it becomes difficult to keep up with all the jargon. Today, we're going to be deconstructing the very idea of sustainable development, its feasibility as an ideal to be pursued, ESG goals, and whether that is all we should aspire to achieve. Bringing things down to brass tacks, today we'll talk about the dichotomy of growth versus development and its varied and perhaps ubiquitous facets. Joining us in conversation today is the founder of Living Pink, Mrs. Nivvedita Jain. Living Pink enables individuals, businesses, and communities to act upon their sustainability awareness through tailored solutions across ESG auditing, reporting, sustainability transformation, stakeholder engagement, workshops and training, and CSR programs. A testament to how best we can harness technology to champion more humane causes. And who better to talk about this new seismic change than Ms. Jain herself? First off, let me just say, Nivita, it is a pleasure to have you here on board for this venture of ours.
Thank you, Amaya, for having me here. I'm pretty excited to converse with you, and it's also great to be here because as an alumni, as I had mentioned earlier, it's always great to engage back with the university and with the great things that the students are doing today. So yeah, thank you for having me.
The pleasure is all ours, ma'am. And now, before we get into any specifics, what does sustainable development mean to you and the industry at large from your subjective opinion?
I think it's pretty simple that you're being sustainable when you are being empathetic about every person in the ecosystem other than just what you are deriving from a single purchase or a single action. I think if you are conscious about the impacts of all your decisions and all your actions in as many facets as possible, that can help you be sustainable. And when we come to what is sustainable development, the moment you start taking, the moment every person in the ecosystem, like especially those who are contributing to larger decisions such as business owners, policymakers, the moment they start being more conscious of the impact on multiple levels of different actions and different decisions, when they start doing that, that is what would be sustainable development. Theoretically, of course, we say that sustainable development is when you're conscious of how much resources you use today, and to make sure that they do not die out for the future generations.
That's a very nuanced take. And what steps do you think you, as an entity in Living Pink, have taken to achieve this ideal?
You're right when you say that it's an ideal because it quite is. And it is an ideal because we as a society are so used to not functioning in this way. But if we, of course, it depends on the pace of change that occurs in the upcoming years or decades, if we have that much time as a society. But what we do, it's been about 1 year since I've started building Living Pink, and we've set it up as a consulting firm. And we have a consulting firm, we also have a non-profit foundation, so we run both the entities. And we do acknowledge the fact that how much micro actions can actually together create an impact in a macro way. And that correlation, that constant need for correlation, that both the things have to go simultaneously, even though when you look at both the things separately, they may seem like very different pictures. What's happening micro and what's happening in the macro may seem like it's like two completely different situations and two completely different scenarios, but how intuitively they are connected to each other. And that is what actually led me to establish it as a consulting firm, like one side as a consulting firm and one non-profit foundation. The kind of impact we try to make in the non-profit side, we keep engaging with communities. In the consulting side, we work with organizations and companies to help them make decisions that can that, of course, at the end of the day, trickle down to what consumers perceive and engage with as products or as services or anything else. And so everything that you mentioned that we do with regards to ESG reporting or ESG transformation or understanding life cycle impact or carbon footprints, all of those things fall under consulting projects at the consulting firm. So that's what we do, and that's how we try to make an impact. Because something that I have always emphasized on while building the firm, and something that we constantly wish to emphasize on, is to change this perspective that sustainability is hard or sustainable development is expensive to implement, or it's a very black and white image that we have about it. And what we are trying to change in an overall way is that every little action counts. B, we try to make it affordable and tailored to
needs.
because that's what can help them actually implement the situation, the suggestions, right? It's if we go ahead and give a cookie cutter solution to a micro firm, to a micro scaled company or a large company, of course, I mean, it will not work out. It can't, right? And the focus is to make it easier. The focus is to how can we ensure that the companies actually are able to implement these changes. So we also follow them through the changes with workshops for implementation and trainings for implementation, which is it's almost like change management. So that's how we try to make an impact.
Speaking of the resistance to change that companies may have, how receptive do you think companies today are of ESG reporting as a concept? And is it the paradigm shift that you were expecting, or is faster adoption something that should be considered an adequate response from the sector?
Often companies that are more agile in adoption of sustainability measures, practices, reporting are those that are driven by a core leadership that already believes in those values.
It can't be externally imposed.
It's very hard and very rare for moral values to be externally imposed, especially in companies, because we've been traditionally so used to having just price and market share or market value as KPIs to growth. In companies where core leadership is already aware and driven by social values or sustainability driven values, the adoption there is easier and not very externally driven. Having said that, there is massive policy change that has happened in the past couple years in India. SEBI mandated the top 1,000 companies to report their ESG impact. And so just the way you create your financial report, you also have to create an ESG report, which discloses over 100 factors from of what kind of impact you as a company are having, what are your policies, what are your how happy are your employees, even that is something that is reported ideally in an ESG report. So these factors. And so at the top, that change is happening in two ways, through policy ways and through companies that are already morally driven.
Okay, that's actually good to know. Finally, some good news for a change. But speaking of these disclosures that private firms do make, what do you think about the growing trend of greenwashing that companies do to better present a front to their investors? And do you think that mandating ESG disclosures is the only way we can bring about change, or can we work with human psychology, as you've mentioned before?
Human psychology always has to be part of decision strategy design for adoption of anything that has not been done before. It's like you have to rewire how you function. It's like as if for so many years, if you're so used to not having a healthy diet, and tomorrow you decide that like we do for New Year's resolutions, by the way, that for so many years I've not done something. From 1st January I promise I'll do these things, and I'll stick to them across the year. So that's not practical, right? Like that's where you are discounting how you function, how your brain functions, how your nervous
Right.
system functions, and you just can't do that for any change. And it's literally the same for companies and for our economies. Like you can't just wake up and be like, "Kal se I'll do this." Okay, so we all know that scams happen, right? We all know that there's no lies or nothing to be like yeah, there's nothing to hide about it, but like we all know that there are even the biggest of firms, they play around on their financial reporting.
Yeah.
Let's come to ESG reporting, where
Right.
greenwashing and like or ESG campaigns, sustainability driven marketing campaigns where greenwashing happens. Now let's look at that parallelly.
Yes.
There are no quantifiable measures. There are quantifiable measures, but
Yeah.
there are a lot of different ways to quantify impact.
Right.
And we as a society have not been able to derive an exact and perfect mechanism to quantify impact in dollars.
Right. Okay.
Dollars is how the whole world
Yeah.
functions, right? We all function based on that. And because we are unable to and also humans, we measure everything. We want to measure the
Because that
returns of
semblance
everything.
of control. Yeah.
Yeah, we want to do that. We are yet to find an exact way to measure impact and measure impact particularly in dollars.
Right.
And till the time we do not achieve that, everything is largely qualitative.
Yeah.
And if anything is qualitative, there's so much room
Scope.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
play around, right?
Right.
So I think that greenwashing, so that is what leads to greenwashing. Like in the financial space, we call it a fraud,
Yeah.
very simply, and we call it a lot more things. Here we call it greenwashing.
But talking about this sort of distinction between individual responsibility and corporate responsibility, shouldn't the onus fall on larger corporations more than individuals? And shouldn't the government play a greater role in sort of verifying claims made by corporations and have a greater role to play?
There are three stakeholders here.
Yeah.
One, the corporates, the
Yeah.
government, and the consumers, right?
Right.
But let's put it in that way, that the government should ideally have the highest onus, and
Yes.
greater to the corporates, greater to the consumers, right?
Right.
Again, I think that that is not fully how it should be. Yes,
Okay.
government is really, like, they all have different responsibilities that are interlinked, is what I am trying to point out. That yes, the government is heavily dependent to ensure sustainability, or make sustainability a more preferred choice,
Right.
or a more attainable choice by corporates
Mm-hmm.
and also by consumers.
Right.
Government should be looking for both
It
the
should not
things,
both
right?
ways. Yeah.
Yeah. Coming to onus falling between corporates and consumers, I feel that I think it's quite a chicken and egg problem, that a lot of companies that are companies that are being pressured by investors and policymakers and the trade mechanisms to implement sustainability, they a lot of times do not find consumer support to actually implement that sustainability. So implementing sustainability requires money at the end of the day. You are changing, it also requires a lot of time, it also requires a lot of patience and willingness by a company's employees to make that happen. Let's say they've invested that and the consumers be like, okay, I care about sustainability, but I don't want to buy a sustainable product. People want to go for the cheapest product out there, even though we say that, oh, the consumers are so much more aware. It's a typical intention action problem. So I don't feel that more of the onus is on the corporates. I feel that given the huge population that we are,
Mm-hmm.
if each individual starts demanding more sustainable goods, or at least one sustainable good in each segment of the products that they consume, the supply has to automatically change. The companies won't have an option. And I feel that the power that every consumer has could actually create a larger impact in change of strategy design by corporates than what a government policy is expecting them to do.
But don't you think that as entities, corporations on a whole produce or have a greater ecological footprint on the planet than individual consumers do? And I get that, the aggregate of consumers is surely greater than what an individual industry produces. However, shouldn't then equivalent effort be made by corporates? Like, shouldn't companies,
Hmm.
because there's a power asymmetry here, right? There's an information asymmetry. Because, okay,
Yeah.
considering a state like India where literacy rates are also lower, our relative poverty levels are also higher, expecting consumers solely to bring about change may be a little unfeasible at this point in time. So shouldn't, at least for now, corporates spearhead the green revolution?
Companies are creating that much of carbon footprint because we as consumers are demanding that much of product. If we each individual does not buy 5 t-shirts in 1 month, the company will not want to produce. Why will they want to create an extra supply and it will not get sold? Why will they want that? And they are creating that, and that much oil and machinery is being used. They have to achieve that level of efficiency and that scale of manufacturing because there is demand for it, and they are capitalists. They want that money, right? That's just the way businesses work.
So what do you think are the potential hurdles that we will continue to face in this journey towards creating a more ecologically sound or sustainable society as we go forward?
Certain hurdles that we'll keep facing is definitely one being resistance to
Yeah.
change. By I think that's the biggest hurdle.
The
Then
inertia that sets in because we're so used to
yes,
ideas being done certain.
yes, and also lack of realization of how immediate the impact of everything is. I love to give this example that I think we all crib about the weather so randomly,
Yeah.
right? Like we on random days, and so easily we'll go like, oh, it's so hot, oh, it's not how it used to be, oh, it's so strange that it's raining today. It did not rain like this in the previous years. And that's exactly where you're facing the change. Like it's here, you are experiencing it, you're going through it, and we still don't realize it. So I think our incapability to realize that you are going through the change that you think will happen in 2070,
Yeah.
that is a significant hurdle. Another hurdle could be financing. I think if
Okay.
we have better financing for
Right.
green projects or for sustainable development, it could actually help aid
Mm-hmm.
aid the constant gap that I've been trying to point out, that because consumers are not acting upon it, and that's why companies are not making that shift. If
Mm-hmm.
we have better and more um, a more motivating uh, green financing policy, and we help companies to fund sustainable development where they can continue functioning and building on sustainable development strategies and products without gaining profits from it, that can help.
So, like to extrapolate a bit from what we've been talking about, what about supply chain resilience, right? Because supply chains usually end up being one of the
Correct.
more polluting parts or one of the more egregious bits
Yeah.
or aspects of the final product's emission in total. So, how
Right.
do you make our supply chains greener?
So we don't only need to make our supply chains greener, we also need to make them better we also need to make the livelihoods better for those who are
Mm-hmm.
part of the supply chain. That's very
Right.
important. Sustainability is not just ensuring that the carbon footprint, like what I started off first with, the
Yeah.
sustainability is not just the carbon footprint in the supply chain, and it also includes the livelihoods of people
Mhm.
part of the supply chain.
So, do you think the focus we place on environmental aspect of ESG is something that we tend to overdo a bit, and maybe other aspects tend to get more attention? So, what can we do to
Yeah.
rectify that? To have a more holistic approach to ESG?
So just remember that E, S, and G, the reason why we call it ESG and not just E is because three of them have an
Yeah.
equal importance.
Yeah.
And in fact, we didn't even speak of governance throughout this discussion.
Yeah.
But uh, also because as consumers, again, like we tend to not be as aware of what kind of governance practices in a company can, like how can they indicate the performance on E and S. Like we're not, when we call it environmental sustainability,
Yeah.
then we're only focusing on environment.
Yeah.
And when we say social sustainability, then we're only focusing on people.
Yeah.
And in fact, that brings me to the point that while all these terms may sound so like as if they all mean the same thing, right? Like for a layman, we all think that, oh, these are just words being thrown by
Yeah.
companies in their marketing processes, and they all mean the same thing. And that's where the consumer is being lazy and relying on heuristics for decision
Yeah.
making. That's what I mean, right? But
Right.
if you take that extra step to just understand what these different terminologies mean, just give that 1 second thought. You don't even need to Google, and you'll understand it.
And lastly, like when we say that we need to inform ourselves better by, reading more technical articles and understanding the differences that
Yeah,
may arise due to similar sounding terms, doesn't that come from like a place of privilege? Because again, we have the access to this information and we
right.
have the ability to comprehend this. There are still major chunks of population in India which may not be able to, avail themselves of this information. So what do you think we as laymen, as laypersons, can do to better understand what sustainability entails as a whole, and how can we become more ecologically sound consumers?
First of all, I think that yes, I agree that the fact that both of us are sitting over here and discussing this, we're less than 1% of the
Yeah,
population. I am fully aware of that. And yes, we are privileged to also have access to this information. But then again, that's where the onus is on us to have the
yeah,
awareness, right?
exactly.
The rest of the other population which does not know about sustainability or like does not have access to that information kind of implies that they probably don't even have access to proper education. They don't even have access to proper health and well-being or clean water, and
Right.
all of those fall under sustainability. So it's
Mhm.
our job to be aware so that they can reach a place
Where they
where
can
they
also
can
start.
start
Yeah,
caring about these things. That's the correlation that I'm talking about.
fair enough. Truly, like the landscape feels so rife and fraught with opportunity and hurdles that could range
Yeah.
from like, government regulations to investor wariness to just plain ignorance on the part of consumers in making sure that they are also supporting causes that help make it a more sustainable place to live in. But I guess only by embracing the idea or concept of sustainable development for all of us as consumers, as corporations, as government, can we create a more ecologically sound world. So thank you so much for joining us, ma'am. It was a pleasure to hear from one of the most foremost minds in the industry and gain a more holistic understanding of what it takes to go from economic growth to economic development for all. And that's going to be all for today, folks. Tune in next time to hear more from the economists next door and to learn about the world from sustainable lens. Thank you so much.
Thank you.